Martin, you're a sports scientist, an educator, and you've been involved with breathwork for over a decade. I'm curious, what got you into breathwork?
Oh, I actually got into respiratory physiology when I was in a lab at university. So I studied exercise physiology. In my second year, we had two professors who were respiratory professors, and they would just happen to be testing the strength of our diaphragm. And it went down in the workshop, this little handheld device that looks at the pressure you could generate. And when it came to me, that kind of the average that people were getting was about 80 to 120 centimeters of water. And then my housemate got like 150, and the guy goes, that's better than average. And then when it came to me, I hit 220 on the first time. And I was like, haha, I was like, I'm good at this. So then you're like, okay, I've never seen that much again. So we went again and did 250. So that was like, okay, essentially they pulled me into the labs and said, we want to do more tests on you to look at your respiratory muscles. And before I knew it, I'd kind of smashed all these tests and just found out that I was very good at, my breathing muscles were very good. And I'd always been able to hold my breath for very long. So I was very curious then. And that essentially led to me doing a master's in that area. And looking at how we can utilize tools to improve respiratory muscle strength to improve athletic performance and reduce inflammation in the body via breathing. And then I got into a clinical career of essentially helping people with breathing issues and sleep issues. And it was around about 2016, 2017 when I moved to Australia that I went through my own journey of struggling with anxiety. And I got into yoga, and within yoga, they tried to get me to slow my breathing down as, you know, doing box breathing in a long 5 or 4 minute yin yoga pose. And I realized I couldn't because my mind was racing. And that was where I kind of realized the power of like what breath can do in terms of self-awareness. That I'd realized that I was a very extroverted person that was always on the go, always stressed, but I never really understood that actually I was quite an anxious person. I was probably driven through fear. And it was that point that I then entered the journey of breathwork.
Interesting. Did you have any idea at that time where this space would go? Because it seems like it's just exploded in terms of an opportunity in terms of the breathwork space, healing, trauma, managing stress. And I feel like 10 years ago that opportunity, but it's almost like you fell into a field where at the time probably those opportunities weren't there. Yeah. But you got to really do that.
Yeah.
Do the hard work in the weeds and figure it all out while before this opportunity came. And it seems like your skill set for over a decade got built up. So like now is actually an amazing time to have that skill set because it's at the forefront of everyone's mind.
Interestingly enough, I didn't, because I think it was maybe around 2016, 17 when Matthew Walker released his book,
Sleep Book,
Why We Sleep.
Yeah.
And because I'm respiratory and sleep, I went in on the sleep aspect of things, and it never really kind of blew up into this big thing. There was a few places that were doing sleep coaching, and that was what I was aiming at, like managing stress and sleep and with breathing. But then, it was obviously for me, it was the COVID period. Yeah, that phase where there was lockdowns and Wim Hof came on the scene, and obviously anxiety went through the roof, and it was a breathing related issue. I just felt like as that was happening, now's the time that something is going to happen. So why not leave a clinical career that I felt there was limitations for me to be able to truly help as many people, and in the way that I wanted to help them, to then actually go online and go all in with it. And it just happened to be, I guess, I was fortunate to be in a position to have an authority in a space that was needed at a time that was needed. And that's led to where I am now.
How was that transition going from being in clinic to essentially, moving into a more entrepreneurial space? And at that time, online wasn't as big as what it is now. Like COVID changed the whole landscape as coaching.
Let's paint a picture. Like I was trying to get an online business going whilst working in the clinics. I've said to you before, like training, relationships, up at 6 a.m, going to bed at like 9 o'clock, trying to wind down, struggle with your sleep, to try and get things going, to then doing that for 6 months and then all of a sudden being just me, who is now my wife, my laptop on an island in Nusa Penida in Indonesia with no one around. That was scary. Like I'd gone from such a fast-paced life to nothing other than just me and my laptop. It took me about 2 weeks to adjust. You can imagine just now the body's constantly just looking for seeking things to do, but there was nothing to do. So took a lot of adjusting. I thought, I've just got to sit down with my laptop and I've just got to do one thing. And I just read a book, 7 Simple Habits to Prevent Burnout. And I was like, right, now I've got a book that's 1,500 words. What can I do? Can I create this into a course? Right, I'm going to put it out to the world and generate a course. And then I put it out to the world, and guess what? I had one person show up.
Always starts with one.
Yeah. And I remember one of my good friends, Conrad Francis, saying to me, like, if there's one person, show up, because it might be a client. So I showed up. He got basically an hour, 90-minute free consult for whatever, $40 to pay to do the course or whatever it was, online session. And I was like, this guy's going to be like, no, he's definitely going to be a client. Never heard from him again.
After that, what made you pursue it as opposed to? I'm sure there would have been some dialogue in your head, and the inner critic could have been.
I knew that there is going to be failures. I knew that, and it still put me off from doing online workshops. Not gonna lie, but I just thought, right, that didn't work. What other avenues can I try? And then it was like, well, let's just put out free workshops online and see who shows up. And before I knew it, it was like 100 people, 150, 250 people. And then they were like, okay, Martin seems to know what he's actually on about here. And it was like referrals out to different schools, to different businesses. Can you do a workshop here? Can you do a workshop there? Hey, do you do personal coaching? And that just became, I guess, a catalyst for me to go, right, let's just meander this way out. And eventually it became serving over like 80 people one-on-one in an 8-week program and reducing their stress by more than 50%, and just changing the people's lives through sleep, breathing, nervous system regulation, understand themselves, etc., etc. And I never thought that I would put myself in a position to be deemed or looked at as an authority in the space, but I knew I had the knowledge and skill set to do it. But there was a few instances where I became more confident and thought, I've got to go in. I've got to just kind of reveal this nerdy person inside who is really, really interested in this area, and he's got to put it out there.
Did you find you had a bit of imposter syndrome along the journey?
Yeah.
And how'd you navigate it?
Imposter syndrome in that, like, looking to other people in the space and going, they're ahead of me. But also having an internal kind of like maybe a bit of a jealousy battle of that. I'm also as good as that person. I need to be able to get to that place at the same time.
Is in you're not getting almost the recognition for your skill level.
And that came from feeling like I was just in a clinic with just one-on-one person, and I was like bound to medical practitioners who were doctors who were a senior above me, and they were telling me what to do. It's like, actually, I feel as if I've got more to give through the information that I understand that's away from medical, that can kind of connect dots together. That then, like once I came out of that, to then go online, to then, eventually get the confidence to have people, the impact that you see when you get testimonials and people change people's lives, and then people reach out to you and go, hey, look, can I learn from you? Because that's what happened. I never intended to build like a training program. It was just I had that many people reach out to me and say, hey, look, I'd love to learn from you for 6 months or so. So
it was just a need, and then you get runs on the board, you get results, and sort of just propels confidence and goes from there. What was the point that you went from being in clinical, I guess you could say have the clinical handcuffs on, which I can totally appreciate that, and be in that role, and then go, nah, I'm done with this. I want to have a crack and affect more people, because that's a big thing to do. In particular, being a clinical role where you have the stability, the safety, and then you leave the country and go to Bali, and then you just burn the bridges and you go for it. What was the point? Did something come up along that play, or did something that made you feel like I can't keep doing this?
There was a few times where I'd presented new ideas that were kind of innovative in science, that were kind of that I would have been able to do, that I felt would have got results, but it was almost just like, hey, look, great ideas, we can see the science, but it's not really in our kind of medical practice or scope of practice to try that sort of thing. And it's not outrageous stuff, it's just simply trying breathwork over medicine, right? And there was one time where I presented to a governing body in the respiratory science space, where it was essentially looking at how can we utilize breathing protocols to manage stress. And I gave a really nice case study of reducing a guy's blood pressure from 140 over 90 to 115 over 80, 115 over 90, something like that, in the space of 8 weeks with just breathing relaxation, nasal breathing exercise, no medication.
What did you give him? What was the protocol?
What was the protocol?
Yeah.
It was just simply down regulation practices before bed. Just get him to do some progressive muscle relaxation. He was nasal breathing during exercise and making sure he's down regulating after exercise. And then there was some kind of like stress inoculation stuff where we just get him to stress himself in terms of doing challenging things and exercise or ice baths, but making sure he learns how to down regulate that sort of thing. And it was just putting structures in place to improve his sleep. And in the space of 8 weeks, we reduced his blood pressure from stage 2 hypertension to normal tension and doubled his heart rate variability. And I presented that, and there was cardiologists there, and I went up to the cardiologist after and I said, okay, so what are your thoughts on that? And it just got a bit of a pat on the back. And I was like, what about we could make a referral scheme with this? We can actually have a treatment pathway for people who might have mild hypertension, who you don't want to put on hypertensive medication yet, but there's a thing we can do here. And it's like, yeah, but so I was like, I'm out.
Yeah, sounds like you had some options to. They've got a very closed paradigm of operating, and then anything outside of that box, even if it's an effective and can really make change, they can't. They're not willing to entertain it, and if they're not willing to entertain it, just I guess you probably felt like it's fair to say you probably felt like you're out of alignment.
Yeah, I felt like there was more innovation or creativity within me that was being held back by a bound of medical practice that could be used, and saw other people using elsewhere and getting results. And I thought, why can I not do that?
Interesting. Did you try and develop your master around the breathwork respiratory system on yourself first before applying it to other people?
Oh, I always do the practices. yeah.
No. What did that look like in terms of challenging it and you playing with different techniques and seeing what works, what doesn't before going up? So it
started out with me doing the understanding. Actually, I had femoral acetibular impingements in both my hips, and started to understand how I was very kind of tense and tight, and my immobility issues, and how the breath could actually open up spaces and allow muscles to relax, the nervous system relax to open up. So that was the first kind of step of like, we actually really have control over our nervous system and attention in our body, as well as the internal aspects. And then it was like the next step was like, how relaxed can I actually get using my breath? And then it became something along the lines, it's like, how can I now integrate this and understand free diving and breath holds, but in a land dry space? And from there, it just kind of cascaded into integrating that sort of stuff into learning like meditation and like yoga nidra, and understanding the science behind that, and hypnosis as well as and also an area that I got fascinated with. And it just kind of just branched out into a few different areas where I would just try different things and get really absorbed into them. And then eventually it became a sequence of understanding how can you apply these things together. And then when you get the experience of working with people one-on-one, you build up that, okay, right, there's certain patterns here that you can work with, there's certain people it doesn't work with, and you see, you figure out what patterns do work when someone's stressed and when someone's not stressed, when someone's open, someone's not open, when someone will talk about their anxiety versus not talk about their anxiety. And eventually it becomes a framework. So now you've got a framework to work from. And that framework then just becomes your coaching structure.
Exactly right, yeah. Because everything comes from just playing around. Yeah, and you have to play around with things before you can get that. Otherwise, I guess you got to copy what's already out there. And if what's already out there is so rigid, which it sounds like it was, you just got to develop other skills, play around with them. As you said, it's pattern recognition. And understanding not everything. And I did the same. Obviously, as a chiropractor, you do different techniques, and then you play around with this and start a jaw adjustment and do all these different things. And then you're like, oh, well, if someone comes in, they're a guy that's this size and they're that, this technique's probably going to be good. But if it was this sort of person, it probably doesn't work, and you can actually develop a system or build around that, and that comes around just like playing around with what you think works, and then developing recognition and competency. The breathwork movement's got so big. I would probably say in the last 3 to 5 years, it seems like it's exploded, and there's a lot of facilitators, people leading, all that sort of space. How do you pick a fraud?
Good question. If they are telling you it's a fix-all and it's definitely a solution to all your problems, and that it's almost comes off as real salesy, would be the first thing that I would kind of be like, okay. If someone kind of passes judgment, or what would the word be? dismisses your issues if they come up and you're trying to ask questions about why you may feel a certain way, and they just project it off and just go, that's okay, it's just part of the process, and can't answer questions with depth, or don't have stories related to it, would be another one that I would look at. And then I think you got to do a bit of research really, and just go like, okay, what is their actual story behind it? What is their credibility behind doing things? Because it doesn't take long to look into someone's website and go, okay, what's their story? And you can see, well, actually only a year or two ago, they were also a person who was just learning about this. And then why is it that they've now got maybe a big certification or a big program? And there's plenty of people out there who are very good at what they do. And there's plenty of people out there who are very good at marketing. At what they do.
Exactly right.
So it's hard. The problem is that online space is so full of so many people who sound smart, who will confidently talk up the game, but there's no substance behind it. And they can have thousands of followers because they have controversy or whatever it is, but then they can charge people quite a high amount, get terrible results with those people, but that other person on the other side might only have maybe 70 people who are following, who are their close family members. So that person on the other side doesn't get a voice. So yeah, it's like, can you see testimonials of people actually giving video testimonials, not just of an experience? Like, I felt good at a breathwork facilitation. Like, anyone can feel great after breathwork. You just breathe as hard as you can, and you get a runner's high. But is there any substance behind the journey of that person going through the transformation of where their problem was and where they are now? And are they still feeling that great?
Definitely. And as you can really bullshit social proof as a way of influencing people as well. If someone can is very good at marketing, understands how content creation, can build a good Instagram, they essentially regurgitate, as we said earlier, about other people who actually do know what they're talking about, but they literally just regurgitate the information. So you sound like you know what you're talking about with your own spin, really good marketing, and you can actually come up as a person with minimal runs on the boards, with no depth of understanding, but they just know the right little comments, and you can trick. And people who go into that space, they're often, they go into their completely vulnerable. Most of the time people go in there with no idea what the fuck's going on. They're just like, I've been going through some stuff. I'm coming to a workshop, and they're just like, I don't know what to expect. And then the thing is, they don't have a lot of people wouldn't have the acumen to be able to go, they've been to a few different facilitators and they've got a feel, and they you know what I mean? So it can be, I guess, as you said, they're all great points, but sometimes I guess you just have to, do your research. Ask other people who they've been to, how they experienced it.
Be willing to try, and to be open to trying different people as well. Or like, jump on a call with someone and really like, does this person actually assess your problem? Or do they just go, right, you've got the answer's breath work? Do they actually look at you and go, okay, right, we're going to look at your mechanics of your breathing. We're going to look at this. We're going to look at that. We're going to look at your level of stress. We're going to measure these things and get a clear picture of your problem. That's, for me, I mean, there's a difference between breathwork facilitation and someone who's a breath coach or practitioner. There's a complete difference there.
What is it?
I think a facilitator is someone who's holding space for someone to use the breath to open up to how they feel, to build some awareness and be in that space of allowing that person to do that. A practitioner or a coach is someone who's actually going, right, I'm going to take you through a cascade of different habits, tools and practices that you can implement in your life for the specific reason, individually, for your problem, and will end up getting to the solution that you need to get to.
It's fair to say that most of the people out there, they'd be facilitators.
Facilitators, and there's even a difference between the facilitators. There's a facilitator who can actually hold space to help someone heal, which I would say is someone who is trying to provoke curiosity in another person to bring up their own ideas and create their own intentions. And then there's facilitators who will try to use influence and tell them that if you breathe like this, you will feel happy, you will feel strong, you will feel courage, you will feel love. And they'll play all this uplifting music with it whilst they're doing that. And for me, that's a difference. It's influence. And there are, if we go into the psychoanalytical part of it, there's a difference between someone coming up with their own ideas and their own creativity to get through their own healing versus just having someone being told and plant it as a suggestion. And that suggestion can make someone feel high and feel good, but what do they have to do? Come back. And what does that make? A great business model.
Dependency.
dependency. It's a great business model, right?
Exactly right. With like, do you feel like the space needs to be regulated?
It's hard. It's obviously a very hard thing to regulate. There are some governing bodies, and I believe there is people who I communicate regularly that are trying to build some form of regulation, and I think that maybe one day we'll get there.
For you, what do you reckon that would look like in terms of something? I guess it's covers a base level, but it doesn't have to be, I guess, too extensive.
I think we just need to understand what we're doing, what we're playing with when we're actually doing things like breath work, because we're not just playing with physiology, we're playing with psychology, and we're playing with nervous system. So if people are in a position where they have past history of trauma, and that person who then has been trained by a facilitator for a week or two, and they understand polyvagal theory, and they think that's it, I'm now trauma informed because I understand polyvagal theory, then holds a space for someone who maybe some memories come up of a severe traumatic incident, and that person just has no capacity to actually understand and hold space for that person or to follow up or what to do. That's going to help that person be safe and process it. Then we're in a situation where people are just bringing up traumas for the sake of just an experience.
Of course, yeah.
Right.
And if there's no integration and no guidance there
needs to be depending on the style or type of breath work that someone's trying to do, and with the intention of they're trying to hold, they need to have at least a certain level of understanding really what it is that we're truly doing.
Because its expertise can come in the form of, I guess, professional training like yourself, or can come in, someone could be not professionally trained, but then they've, I imagine they've just like yourself, they had their own curiosity, went through their own process and went deep, and they're actually a really learned person and play around with different things, and they get to a level where they did it with themselves, and they really felt like they mastered themselves, and they're very self-led in terms of their own education, and they're getting the information from the right people and mentored by the right people. You can get some people who are like, I guess it's like, Derek from More Plates, More Days. I think from my understanding, he's not formally educated, but he's fucking very intelligent. And everything. But the thing with everything is it takes time. Whether you're formally or informally, you can't do it in 6 months and 12 months and think, oh well.
I'm not going to say everyone needs to have a master's degree or a PhD in something to be an absolute special in it, but you need to be spending some serious time and graft on learning that and applying it until that you're in a position where you think that you can give a credible level or standard of training.
Definitely. It's interesting, the relationship between cold therapy, breath work, and sauna. And I feel like they've all come up at the same time in the last 3 to 5 years. Why do you think that is? Why all three tend to be? There's been a huge movement.
Obviously, hot and cold have always kind of been a bit of the contrast of just using heat has been something that has been around for a while. I think Wim Hof has played a massive role in bringing the cold and the breath work into because of his charismatic attitude, people gravitate towards him. The style of breath work and the ice will create and release hormones and chemicals in the body that make you feel great. They have impact. I think that what it is, we've gone through a period where it's been challenging for people, and we're probably at a period now where I think the society is lacking resilience the most. What we have now is we have small 2-minute sessions in hard challenging ice baths, or 5 minutes of fast-paced breath work, or sitting in a sauna for 15 to 20 minutes that challenge people, that has now become more accessible, but gives someone an outlet to do something that is short duration with a high level of what feels like achievement and resilience. You don't really find the people who are grafting hard in the gym, doing solid miles, putting themselves through physical stuff, go, I really need to do an ice bath to challenge myself. It's just another part of the process. But it has given people who maybe don't have that outlet to just go, right, actually, I'd like to challenge myself a little bit and get outside my comfort zone, to do that in a short period of time that makes you feel really good after, because of the dopamine hit. And that, to me, is one of the reasons with the novelty of it, is why it's become so popular.
Definitely. I think there's definitely there's greater understanding and awareness around it in terms of, I think traditionally a lot of people would have thought ice bath is like athlete recovery, like athlete pain information. Whereas, I mean, I've got one here. I do mine about 6 times a week and do the sauna, but I'm doing it more for, the cognitive benefits and the mitigation of, cognitively feeling my thinking and my capacity is improved and mitigation of stress. I mean, I don't get too much pain. I don't feel like I get too much information, but I do it more for the cognitive benefits. And, there's longevity benefits with sauna work and mitigating heat and cold shock proteins and all those sort of things. And I think as people becoming more aware, it's like, oh, this is part of, better quality of life. Not just pain and not just athletes. It's like, this is becoming prepared for life is doing this. And anyone who's, in business, anyone who wants to live longer, perform better, they're actually realizing these are tools, and they're fairly cost-effective tools, and they're very easy to implement into your routine. You know what I mean? So I think it's just that awareness of moving away from ice baths are for athletes to no, they're for life, and really integrating that. With regard to the spiritual community, so a lot of people get into, I'll talk first, like from my experience, I got into doing breath work as part of managing trauma and healing, as opposed to going there for like athletic performance or nervous system regulation or these sort of things. So if someone had that, they're like, I've heard, doing the breath work is amazing for like going to that place, things come up, I'm very locked up, I can't get there on my own. What would be your advice for someone wanting to do a breathwork workshop for the purpose of uncovering trauma and going to that place? Yeah,
I think understanding that you're probably best to go in when you're in a position where you're feeling grounded to begin with. We can explore our inner world from a much better space when we are grounded and regulated, because we're less reactive, and therefore we can do it without judging ourselves or judging other people or just judging what comes up. We can observe. We don't have to claim meaning to something when we can just sit back and observe from a space where we're like, okay, things come to mind, feelings come up. Yes, in the moment when you're doing that sort of breath work, you might not be able to rationalize it in that space, but if you're a grounded individual coming into it, when you come out of it, you're going to be much better. So I would say that someone who wants to get the most benefit from doing breath work should be doing the work beforehand.
What would that look like to you?
Doing the self-development, journaling, looking at the things that present up in life that challenge you, the little complexes that trigger you. Is that a relationship with your mother, with your father, with your parents, with your loved ones, who's in front of you? Like, be doing that work already in space to develop, to get a hand of who you are already. Because if you don't have a strength in your own ego, and I don't mean that in a way where you're like inflated and you're narcissistic or you're a bully. I mean just grounded in your identity. You can get into a space of spirituality and into breath work and things like psychedelics and become actually more lost.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And if you're stuck in that world for too long,
and then you're not grounded.
Yeah.
If you're not grounded in your biology, in the earth, in yourself, then you might end up just becoming someone who you don't want to be.
And a lot of people, I feel like, who are lost, they find their way into the world of spirituality, whatever you want to call it, and they go down that path and they start to get some awakenings, or they start to get some realizations, and then there's no grounding, there's no integration, and then they just get stuck down that path. And it just goes deeper and deeper and deeper.
Integration's a funny one, because if you ask people what is integration, like what would you think that integration would be?
For me, what's integration? For integration, for me, it'd be, I'd always think, what's my intention coming into something? And then whatever comes up, I guess, is whatever comes up. It's amazing how often your intention does come up, whether it's you do a mushroom ceremony or retreat, or you do when you go to that place. But for me, it's, okay, something comes up, then it's, you obviously time the process, and then you've got to actually action that into it, not just get stuck in. I find a lot of people in the spiritual community, everything's in the head. Oh, it's interesting, that came up. Oh, I can't believe it. It's amazing. I went so deep here, all this sort of stuff. And then it's like, but you just keep getting stuck in there.
Yeah.
And you're just going into this depth and, I understand myself so much better. It's like, but you're not doing fucking anything.
Yeah.
You're still heads in the clouds. You're not grounded. You're not integrating back into reality. Whereas I think how I view it is that I'm pretty motivated, self-aware. I'm doing my things, and then I'll be like, I need to tap into that world to start to discover myself a bit better, get what I need, and come back to my world. And integrate it. I mean, make the changes. If it's something that comes up that, for example, you're super hard worker, you're trying to do all these things, but you have this attachment to being a high performer and having to be, like for me, it was like, doing jiu-jitsu, and I've got the business, and I've got, all these different things, and I've got to be fit, I've got to be in shape, I've got to be, back then it was like, got to be attractive for women, got to be one of the lads, got to do all these attributes. So you can go, where the fuck does that come from? And I was engaging in destructive behaviors in order to try and achieve that and maintain that. And then I obviously got to a point that I went, something's not right, and I didn't know what was right. So then I went into the spiritual world, started to discover where a lot of guilt and shame and what vehicles I was using, and low self-worth, and look, as we said before, trying to get dad's approval, and all these things that I had no conscious awareness. But then doing the work and integrating, for me, it was like, okay, now you go back into your life, and then regulate your nervous system a bit, have boundaries over some things. You don't need to be trained like competing in jiu-jitsu and then excelling in business and doing this and doing that and be ripped and all these things. It's like, it's okay. Just focus on one thing or a couple of things. It's all right. You don't have to be like, just accept yourself. For that. So for me, that's what integrating is taking it and applying it, not taking it and sitting with it, and just keep sitting with it, and then go into another, like become a ceremonial addict or bounce around all different communities. And I don't see why you need to keep going there all the time. Obviously go there for those times where you feel like, fuck, is there a pattern, or is there something, a behavior, or is there something I'm stuck, and my tools I'm using, then I'm still stuck. Then it's like, okay, I've got to do a dance with the devil, or go to a retreat, or and go somewhere deeper and darker. Get what you want, integrate, process it, and then integrate it. That's what I look for, rather than.
I agree. I think the key thing you've said there is action. All right, acting differently according to the belief system or the updated belief system that you've just uncovered. If you go to a retreat or a ceremony or something like that, and then within that you have your mind blown, and you've just kind of created this new belief structure of like, I understand and see myself differently now. Well, what a waste that is if then you don't actually go and change your life. In fact, isn't that going to cause more anxiety and cognitive dissonance because now you're aware of it? Isn't that creating more suffering? And then you have to go back to find the hit again to make yourself feel pleasurable again.
Exactly right.
So it really is like no challenging, whatever comes up, it could be challenging. It could be great. But if you have a new belief system that you can actually then start taking action in what I would say is the psychosocial bridge, where it becomes a part of just taking it from here and actually putting it into the world by action, by changing how you actually live, that's integration.
I agree.
Integration is like, okay, right, I've learned this about myself, I'm going to actually act accordingly. Maybe you found out like you don't share enough time with your loved ones, like you work too much, and you can start to feel the guilt towards your wife or something because you're not there present with her. Well, don't go back to your structure just going back to work again. Like actually go and be present with your wife and talk to it and what came up. The language we can use and really can cast a spell and create on whether it's going to happen or whether it's going to not. And I think what is really important, part of the integration, is the first communicating it to perhaps maybe the therapist you're working with or whoever it is, but then whatever comes up, trying to communicate it to the social aspect of the world that it's actually related to. Yeah, because we're either relating to in here or relating to out there. And as soon as we can start to relate our inner to the external, that's when we actually have truly integrated.
Definitely. And I feel one of the first steps is obviously having a regular journaling practice. That you really keep yourself accountable. So if you're aware of that, you don't need to go do mushroom ceremony every second week to be able to go to that place that you have those bigger dips where you go into that dark place, but then you learn how to manage your nervous system, learn how to, just basic practices. You might journal for 3 to 4 minutes a day. Everyone's got 3 to 4 minutes a day. You might do a small breathwork routine every morning,
I'm
every
more
night.
of the essays once a month.
Yeah,
I'll write like 15 to 20,000 words once a month. And I'll go deep into things.
Yeah. At least you're getting it from here
for sure,
to there,
for sure.
which gets out of there.
Yeah,
you know
for
what I mean?
sure, yeah.
And then from there, like that's at least you've got it to there, which is a good start. And then it's got to go from there into reality as well, which I find just so many people, and I've just so many people in that world, they just, they might get it to there, maybe to there, but then it doesn't go into reality because that execution, that's another level of...
One step that I found quite helpful is when we get it from there to there is then revisit, look at the story you write, then revisit from a frame of, okay, like if I was to truly take responsibility for this myself in my own actions, what would I then rewrite this story as in terms of what's it showing me about me and what actions can I take to improve of whatever's come up? And then the integration is about reacting on those components. So it's like I wrote a 50,000 word essay on every relationship that I had been through because I kept getting into the same pattern of relationships. Then I looked at it again and said, okay, if I'm to take responsibility because I'm the common denominator in this, what actions were showing up for me? Where are my strengths? Where are my weaknesses? Right, I need to go and work on those weaknesses.
What came up?
People pleaser, lacked boundaries with women, couldn't express anger, got resentful if I kept getting pushed but couldn't speak to those sort of things. So then it led from either them being cheating on me or just arguments and just becoming toxic. I can only control my actions in that space. I can't control the other person's actions in that space other than putting boundaries there. But if I start to live by the values that I want to live with in that relationship, then all of a sudden I can express those values, I can have boundaries to them. Eventually you're going to find a person who listens and a person who wants to be with you. I'm married now. And that was only 3 or 4 years ago that I did that. The next woman I met was the woman that I married.
Once you had that realization, what did your integration process look like?
My integration process was really, when I was out then dating, I was living into my values. I actually wore dog tags. I just had 4 dog tags with my values kind of engraved into it. And I used to hide them. I used to put them behind my thing just to keep me in a line. To remind myself that if someone didn't, they disrespected me or they didn't show me trust or love or ambition, like just this person's not right, probably right. Yeah. And that I would be able to then communicate that up front. Or if I was on dating, maybe a couple of dates down the line, it's like, hey, actually, I can say no to you rather than have to please you and like just either ghost you because I'm too afraid to say bye-bye, or I can literally just say to the face, hey, look, this is not working.
How was it the first few times you had to be more disagreeable face to face?
So challenging. Yeah, I didn't want to, but I knew to be able to change and to get what I wanted to get, I had to.
People pleasing is massive.
Yeah.
Like, especially there's a lot of guys...
probably pissed plenty of girls off, like, annoyed them, frustrated them, but...
Through being a people pleaser?
Probably that and both sides. There's one particular story I do remember where I hooked up with a woman and then the following day or the following week, she'd have my jacket and I went to go and get it from her and she had 2 children. And I was like, look, I'm 30 years old. You got 2 kids. I enjoyed last night, but this was in her house when I was picking it up. I was like, let's be realistic. You've got 2 children. I'm probably not in a position where I'm going to come in and father those. I'm not going to be the right person for you. Yeah. She just looked at me and just kind of like cried. I saw her maybe 6 months later and in a bar somewhere and she came up to me and thanked me. She was like, do you know what? Do you know how frustrating it is when a man just kind of ghosts you or lingers you? She's like, at least you had the balls to step up and say no and give me a reason to why. Yeah, it hurt me and frustrated me, but I've got so much respect for you for doing that. And that earns respect. And when you can show that to other people, people were like, oh, I wish I had that ability to also communicate in that space.
Because you just don't, people pleasers don't get respected.
No.
People like having them around because they can fucking use them to get their own agenda. And they, that's John there. Yeah. Oh, no, John's us. It's because John will do what the fuck John's told. And he'll do, and I can.
Especially if you're a hard worker as well. Yeah. If you're a hard worker and a people pleaser, like you're the perfect employee. For a narcissist.
Correct. Yeah, I took the words out of my mouth. Yeah, and you will just dishonor yourself. And every single people pleaser, particularly guys I've ever met, that they are some of the most angry, resentful on the inside people because they're just fucking pissed that no one. They know, like they know that people don't respect them. They're just there's no respect, and women don't respect people pleasers as well. They like, some of them might like having them around, but the thing is, they don't want to be with one.
Women will push men's boundaries.
Yeah.
To see whether they're masculine, to see whether they are...
It's evolution.
Whether they can hold their groundedness and be who they are. Can they stick up for themselves? Because if you can't, then why would you want to be the father of my children?
Of course.
Well, I want you to be that. So you've got to learn that it's constantly being a test to it.
Yeah,
and not to take it personally.
No, it's evolution wiring that not to go, are you the right man to run my family? It's like, and then once you're married or together, it's like, no.
And men will ongoing. Men will test women. Men will test women in other ways. It's
exactly
just
right.
The psychological good games that evolution has forced us to play.
Of course, definitely. In terms of going back to more like stress and anxiety, what's your approach that, if a client comes and sees you, how do you break that down? For example, someone who's busy, a guy comes in, he's flat out with work.
Yep.
He's stressed out. He does a bit of the gym.
Yep.
But he's just like, man, I'm fucking copping it at the moment.
Yeah.
How would you take him through that process?
First of all, it's going to be like a 5 or 10 minute conversation, just going a little bit deeper, and me testing the person to see how far they'll go in terms of opening up about what it is, because you might just find actually there's a nugget in there where it's just been a problem, like they're having issues with their wife, or their child have left them because they don't want to speak to them anymore because they're having arguments. And if you find that, then it's clear something to work with. But if it's just the accumulation of stresses throughout life, too much work, not enough rest, then you've just got to look at what habits, what areas does that person need to improve. Obviously, being someone who works in the breath space, most people are going to expect that I'm going to do some breathing practices. So that's typically just going to focus on just like, hey, look, let's just look at whether we can build a good practice of correcting your breathing behavior, i.e. looking at how you mechanically breathe and ensuring that you do that for 10 or 15 minutes as a practice before bed. That's down-regulatory, it's going to improve your sleep quality. Sometimes when busy people just do that, and they do that for 10 or 15 minutes a day for a space of a week, they can drop their stress by 25% perceptually, just from simply doing that, just because they're spending some time in stillness, resting, and getting additional increased quality sleep because of the rest they're doing. So that's... anyone out there can just start doing that if they feel stressed, and they'll see benefit. It's just then whether you actually can apply it and sit in that stillness of maybe feeling what you're feeling. Definitely.
At least that's something you can control.
Yeah.
The physiology, and that, as opposed to, I guess, when someone's so in their own head, or alternatively they have very poor perception and self-awareness. How do you work with someone who's very they've got very poor self-awareness?
Yeah.
In terms of the actual, what's the perception of what's going on in their life when you can view it and go, and they can't actually get their head around?
I think the great thing about using the breath as a physiological tool, it actually, a byproduct of it is increasing self-awareness. Like breathing itself is just awareness, because it brings you to a present, right? And it allows you to then actually start to feel and experience and see your thoughts a lot clearer. So the byproduct of just adding that in as a tool to manage stress, in most people, it brings up self-awareness. I noticed that most people that I work with, usually about a month in, they're a lot more aware of what's going on in their life than they were in the first week. So I don't necessarily feel as if I have to approach them differently. There will be some people who will happily go, be very self-aware, and that's great. And there's other people who are not, but there will be some level of opening up. Improvement.
Yeah.
Especially if I'm seeing things, I'm going to ask questions, again, within the boundaries of the relationship that we have and what they sign up for. I'm going to, every now and then, maybe just prod a little question, or just have from my understanding of what maybe how emotions are derived and coping mechanisms that pop up and the language they use, I'll poke and prod around just to see if there's anything that I can kind of get them to open up about. And with the relationship that you build, eventually you find some key things in their life that might have been accumulating, that they've been suppressing or repressing or ignoring.
How does burnout show up?
Mostly shows up in fatigue, confidence, and kind of like sleep issues, but also lack of self-awareness as well. Very interesting. And there is, when we are highly stressed, our brain and body go into a position of elevating our detection to threats on the external. So our focus starts to go more external. Well, what does that do straight away? Reduces self-awareness. Yeah, because the body's in such a fret. It's like we don't want to have threats on the outside, so we're vulnerable, so we're going to pay attention more to the outside. So most people who are burnt out don't realize.
I agree. I went through that last year.
Yeah.
And I'm someone, I believe I'm pretty self-aware, but then even being in self-aware, you can, if you're managing too many different things, and I had my practice, and I was, working full time, plus the business, plus trying to lift a few, like another project, which I didn't have clarity about. And I think that's a lot of that was, I didn't have clarity around a project, and I just went fucking horsepower, just put things on my back, put everything on my shoulders, and went, and that's okay for a little bit, but the lack of clarity, and then I actually went more, as you said, more external, and I forgot to go back internal.
But the more you do that, the more willpower you get, the more adrenaline's thriving in your body, the more you're actually surviving off that element of just stress, producing chemicals in the body are helping you to achieve what you're achieving, but not really necessarily helping you allocate your energy towards resting and recovery.
Definitely
but you don't really know that because you're so, there's so much adrenaline keeping you going. Of
course.
The physiology is shifted to predict stress is going to continue to come, and therefore it will continue to create an elevated stress response so that you can continue to do what you need to do.
Exactly right.
The physiologist adapts to the environment.
Definitely.
So if you're in that environment, your physiology is going to change its environment, but that doesn't mean it's necessarily good for your health and well-being.
Exactly right.
But you might be able to get some goals done.
Exactly right.
For a short period of time.
Exactly right. I think it's can be good short term if necessary, 100%. but not a medium to long term.
There's times when you need to put the foot down.
No, definitely.
For sure. Emergency situations and when you need to get things done.
Definitely.
You just need to know how to recover from that.
It's funny because I, like what you said, because I was doing it for months and months and months, and I went from being in a really sweet spot of like really productive, working, getting a lot of shit done, and then just slight mismanagement, I always look at things as like health is the bottom pillar, relationships is the next one, and call it business, career, work, money, whatever is the top one. So with the health, my sleep was okay. Generally ate reasonably well. I was still doing saunas, ice baths, but the pillar that fell apart for me was relationships, because I went full lone wolf, and that was my tendency. And then I'm aware of this, but when I was in that state, I did lack some self-awareness as well, and I went full, just head down. Just still went to the gym, still did my stuff, but like the relationship pillar started going, and then because that was off, then like you almost just kept going and going and going, and then I was starting to go, fuck, I feel like bloody serotonin's not as good. I can still get shit done, but then you like my enjoyment, I don't feel like I have that enjoyment, and the creativity's not quite there, and it's just all goes from being like in this sweet spot of like really productive working, and then you don't manage yourself a little bit, and then fucking done. And at least I guess that's the part of like pushing to the boundary and then going, see how hard you can go, but then having greater self-awareness earlier and probably some slightly better practices, and then pull back, readjust, get some clarity, and then go for it again. But
so there are stages, right? Most people who get burnt out are very, very enthusiastic to begin with. In fact, probably more enthusiastic than they should be, because most people I observe it's because there's some self-worth issue or fear issue that's driving a level of high performance, let's say. Well, that eventually becomes like a stagnation for a lot of people. They feel like they get stuck at a certain point. Then it turns into frustration, which is chronic stress, and that's where you start to feel a bit more tired maybe. And then it becomes burnout, where it starts to present maybe things like gut issues or symptoms that you just can't really tell. Like I suffered psoriasis massively when I was really anxious, and it was just a symptom of stress. But you go see a doctor and they go, your gut's problem? Yeah, we'll go see a gut specialist. And all the gut specialist is doing is looking at your gut and not going, actually, what's going on in your whole life, right? So burnout is a biopsychosocial issue that we tend to look at as just a work stress-related issue, but it's a confounding of everything.
It's a holistic level issue,
You can be in a horrible relationship and be the fittest person in the world and be burnt the hell out, and your job's easy just because that is bugging you so much.
I agree. What role does nature have for, I guess, managing stress or in alleviating?
I can't think of anything more powerful than nature in general. Like being present, being calm, being grounded, being earthed, like they're all things that allow us, to have some silence, to feel, to have our senses. But nature's very interesting in that it has geometric patterns that we can't see consciously. If you've done psychedelics, you'll see them, right? And those patterns, when they come through our vision, they actually alter our brainwave state. Our brainwave state goes more naturally into an alpha brainwave state, which is a state of relaxation. So that's how powerful just being in nature is, and having the different spectrums of colors and lights and things like that, as well as we're animals at the end of the day, right? We're not meant to be in these structures of blocks, buildings where we're safe, secure, locked in with water. We're part of the evolutionary process where we should be outside and get sun on us and find food and move around. And when we're in nature, it just allows us to have that reset of being naturally who we are, like instinctually who we are, reconnecting to our being
as
again.
humans. Yeah, definitely. Do you find there's a particular environment that has a more powerful response? For example, would it be more coastal? Would it be more like in a jungle? Would it be more rainforest? Is there any, or is there any sort of I guess a more optimal environment to
I think
start getting more connected?
Obviously, when you're out in like greenery and plants and ocean and things that are quite raw, that's going to be more beneficial than just going for a walk on the street per se. But I think that will come down to like your ancestral pathway potentially. Like if you were someone who grew up in a particular area, or your ancestors were born in a particular area that were near mountains, I think that would still be a part of your genetics to like be more relaxed near mountains and have that relationship to it. Whereas if you're someone who grew up in the tropics, or your family's from the tropics, for example, and like over millions of years, like I think being connected to that natural part of your ancestry would have probably the most power. And that's not science-based, that's speculation completely.
Of course, yeah. But I guess there's evolutionary perspective that could make sense.
Yeah.
Definitely, that's interesting. And what about in terms of with guys and stress? I find like women address stress, and the way men and women view stress is very different. I find when you ask a woman, I always ask all my clients, their stress level out of 10, and they always give women generally give higher answers than what men will. I think men view stress as inability, like a weakness, inability to handle a situation, whereas women view stress as stress as well. So they view it more for what it is. Men view it more as I'm not able to handle what's getting put on me. So men will typically give me an answer and go, 3 out of 10. I'm like, okay, you got a business, you got a family, you got this guy's full of shit. So I always say to them, I go, look, it's not your inability to be, it's not, I go, I'm sure you can handle stress well, but are you busy? And they go, oh, fucking flat out. Is there a lot on your life? Absolutely. It's chockers. It's crazy. I'm like, it's fair to say that's there's probably a bit of stress going on, even if you can handle it. And they go, that's, I guess so. I guess you can say, even if you can handle it. So how do you find, because in saying that, a lot of men wouldn't recognize that stress is an actual problem in their life. What's some advice for men?
I think understanding that stress doesn't necessarily mean suffering. So I think some men can come with the perception that if you're feeling stressed, that means that you're suffering. It doesn't necessarily mean that. Like psychologically, I've just had a real pullback from the amount of work that I'm doing, the amount of exercise I'm doing, getting additional sleep, because I recognized probably about 4 or 5 weeks ago that I was in the gym and weights that I was lifting a few weeks ago, it's dropped by 30-40%. I'm just gassing out a lot faster here, but I don't feel anxious. I don't feel like my life's caving in, but there's a marker there. There's something that I'm not quite as good as I was last week or the week before, which suggests to me maybe I'm a little bit stressed. Okay? And then if I just take a step back and go, what have I just done with my life? Well, I've got my own business, got a newborn baby about to be born, I've just got married, trying to find a new house, trying to find a new car. I've just added 6 hours of BJJ on top of that, and I'm still trying to train the amount I was training in the gym as well. Of course that's stress. How much is going on?
Of course. Speaking of BJJ, when you train, I find jiu-jitsu is always interesting one to know, like in terms of where you're at mentally. You don't know, I'd find you don't always get it in the gym, but jiu-jitsu you do. Do you find there's often times that you roll and then you just gas like at a level that you shouldn't be gassing?
Yeah, well, that's what that was also what showing, that was showing up as well. I was like, right, I'm rolling here, and obviously I'm very aware of how I should be breathing and how I do breathe when I exercise. And I was like, I'm taking a lot longer to recover with my breathing, and I feel like I'm not recovering as fast. There's something going on here. So that was then, okay, let's have a look at what's going on. Okay, I'll just take some simple blood markers and have a look at what's going on with my cortisol level, my DHA levels, my CRP levels, inflammation markers. And I come back and I was like, holy crap, there's a lot of information there. Yeah, but it's a hidden stressor. We have stressors that are not hidden, things that we feel, like how hard we exercise, sickness and stuff like that. But the hidden stressors that just accumulate over periods of time that just make us feel like a little bit more tense, that we just kind of don't realize. All of a sudden we're like, then you start feeling your body go, oh, like, why am I so tight? Geez, like, oh yeah, like I haven't been sleeping so well. Oh, I am a little bit more emotional or reactive towards my wife and my kids. Like I can't focus as long. Sometimes you got to step back and just go, what are those things that are maybe hiding up over a period of time that maybe, your sleep's not too great, but it's all right. Maybe you don't think you're that reactive, but your wife's just putting up with it. Yeah. Or you're just, okay, I can focus, but I'm not as productive as I used to be. If you're in your 25, 30, 40s, like you still should be pretty good as a man. You should be able to do all those things pretty sound and perform pretty well. If not, that's a sign that there's too much stress potentially going on.
Absolutely. I think when you have integrate self-awareness and you're doing multiple different things that really challenges you as a human, because when you're not really doing too much that challenge, if you say, for example, you're our age and you walk the dog and that's all you walk the dog and you work, you can think, oh, I'm all right. It's like, because you're not fucking testing yourself. You know, and I, even last year, during the same period where I was burnt out, I was aware that cognitively I was like, I'm not getting the enjoyment, and there was symptomatically there's some things coming out. I go, I'm pushing too hard, I'm not getting the recovery. But when I was in the gym, no issues. I went on the mats, and then literally it was like, and I've been training for 10 years, so I'm aware of how the manage my energy when I'm rolling. And I went from like one day, and the week later, I just went off a cliff, and I was getting my ass bloody. Getting like blue belts, giving me a hard time, and then just gassing out and going. I just went, what the fuck happened? Like I had a session just came out of nowhere, and because I hadn't trained the gi for a while. I've been doing no gi. Okay, I put the gi on, and it was a day class. So I thought, nah, it's probably because it's the gi and it's day class. I went, yeah. No, it was the D. It was the gi day class. It was warm, justifying, and then it started. It went to no gi class. Like about 5 days later, I was like. Just gassing. I was like, where the fuck? And the thing is, I didn't have too much that was going on. That I was like, oh yeah, no, there's definitely, but that was feedback that there's something going on that you're not even, and that was also part of what came as part of one of the things that made me realize I was burnt out, because I had a bit of the cognitive stuff, but then I went, that's not normal, man. And if I didn't do jiu-jitsu, if I just do weights, I probably wouldn't have picked it. Yeah. So like when you stress test yourself in different ways, things come up. Which I think is why it's very important to do like resilience training and different and use different vehicles that actually test your system. Yeah.
And to if someone doesn't have that awareness, maybe to have having some way of tracking your stress, some tool that you can. We have fitness trackers nowadays that all have the ability to measure things like heart rate variability and stuff like that. Like if you're able to actually look at that data and understand it and appreciate what's going on, and then when you do start questioning yourself, you go, right, now's the chance to have a look back at my HRV or my stress scores. I don't need to check it every single day, but I've noticed something's happened in my life. Can I look at that and go, oh yeah, my heart rate is quite elevated, or my HRV is low. That is an indicator that there's stress going on. I also felt a little bit, maybe I need to reassess just for the next week or so what I need to be doing.
What are the key metrics that everyone should be tracking? Whether it's key markers or key metrics.
I mean, the easiest one now is going to be heart rate variability. Right? And that is an indicator of in essence, a correlation to what is happening within our nervous system, to the level of stress that we're under, or the level of ability to get out of stress back into a calm situation. If your heart rate is more variable with your breathing, essentially it just means that your nervous system can respond more and adapt more to the environment in general, which is what we want. That's a robust and resilient nervous system. So that would generally mean someone having typically a higher heart rate variability. But you want to track it over a long period of time, because day to day it's useless. But if you have 4 weeks worth of data, 6 weeks worth of data, even more, 6 months worth of data, you can work out what your standard deviations are. And if you then all of a sudden start to notice that you feel a particular symptom or a sign, and that has changed by more than a standard deviation, which might typically be 10 to 15% and dropped, then you've got something that confirms how you feel. And then you just might need to go and see someone to get a further confirmation, maybe from a medical practitioner or a coach or facilitator or whatever it is, just to go, actually, yeah, we need to step back a little bit now. Or you might not, you might just confirm it if the technology, physiology doesn't really lie.
What technology do you think is accurate and accessible?
As long as you are being consistent with what you're measuring, because they're all not that accurate, but your Oura rings, your Whoop bands, if you're using heart rate variability, any kind of chest strap is going to be more directly accurate, but it's just not as practical. Yeah, because you got to put it on and take it off. Being consistent with it. Don't swap and change. Like, just keep recording with the same piece of equipment, and then it doesn't matter whether it's perfectly accurate, you'll see the deviations.
Do you care much for VO2 max?
The VO2 max, not particularly. It is a great marker, but not particularly in what I'm doing with people. But VO2 max is a very good marker of health and longevity and endurance, performance in general. If I was working with an athlete and they had an opportunity to come and do a VO2 max test and they wanted to look at improving their endurance, or I've had someone that wanted to improve their heart health, then that's something that I might look to do, but it's not necessarily something that I would measure with every single person.
It's more like a secondary, whether it's relevant as opposed to a core feature. What are some core markers you're looking for that people should be assessing with blood work?
Blood work's interesting because it can be those things where you might not know you've got a vitamin D deficiency or a B12 deficiency because you don't feel any different, but that's also maybe stressing your system. You might have some inflammation, high levels of interleukin-6 or CRP levels, and that's showing that maybe you've spent too much time on the screen and you're not getting enough sleep, but you're just not aware, but that's showing in your physiology. It's telling you something. So, like, I don't really say there is one particular marker, but I would try to measure a marker maybe of like a series of cortisol levels just to see if there's a circadian rhythm issue, and then maybe some inflammatory markers and something related to testosterone cortisol ratio or GHEA to cortisol ratios of looking at anabolic versus catabolic states. Blood markers are not so great, again, of just going, you have a particular marker that is low that you just then want to improve. Like, there are specific things, but it does really require a bit of training or professional opinions on those blood markers. I personally will look at my own blood markers and make my judgments on those, and there are only some blood markers that I'll look on other people. That will be a full blood count and looking at like vitamin D deficiency, vitamin B12 deficiency, because they're the most common things that you can kind of just go, right, we can correct these without spoiling other markers or altering other hormones in the body. You try to increase testosterone by giving it a booster, well, you might then alter something else in the body and have a negative impact on those things, and that's not something I feel qualified to make those judgments on.
Okay. If you're looking for, I really see a delineation between a general pop and someone looking to be like optimal. And then it's a lot more work being optimal.
Yeah.
It's a lot more probably budget
in
terms of for the right. So if someone had a very high budget and they came to you, Martin, and said, look, I want to be as optimal as I can be. I want to be a high performer. I'll pay whatever I've got to do to pay whatever testing, whatever treatments. What would that look like to you?
Okay. Yeah. If they were having sleep issues, I would probably have a look at a full sleep study to see what was going on first. Then I would look at their level of stress, either through subjectivity or looking at through levels of inflammation in the body, or get some blood samples, markers, and send it to someone who can actually tell me what's going on there. Then looking at their breathing and how we can functionally improve their breathing to optimize what they need. And then looking at essentially rest-effort ratio of how much effort they're putting into how much rest they can get, and then building self-esteem. That's a process that I go through that. It's called the SABRES model. Sleep, arousal, breathing, rest-effort ratio, self-esteem. It's what I adopted from a guy called Peter Nixon, who was a cardiologist in the UK back in the 1970s, who used to work with people with, back then it was called effort syndrome, which is now burnout. And there was a lot of war veterans coming back who had trauma from the war, then trying to come into jobs where they were trying to work as hard as they were as army soldiers, but they just had no capacity to do so because they were all coming back with burnout. And he used to use that in a medical situation, and I've applied it now in more of a coaching situation, and that will be the spectrum of things that I will look through.
Okay. Speaking of war veterans, just on that topic and PTSD, do you apply your principles and your coaching methods slightly different for someone that presents with pretty severe PTSD?
If someone comes to me with pretty severe PTSD and they've not already had support from elsewhere, I would probably actually say, look, I can help you, but you'll probably need some support with psychiatry and psychology as well as me. So there are scopes to the practice in which that I'll work with. And if someone is beyond that, I'll probably will refer to more specialist care to co-manage it. Especially when it comes to maybe if there's addictions that are being used to support or to cope with things like PTSD. If I'm not qualified to help someone with addiction processes, then I'm going to try and refer out to that person and say, hey, look, maybe I'm not the right time at the moment, but I'm here if you need me. So it depends on where they're at in their journey. If they've already got some level of understanding, they've tried a few things, yes, they've got a bit of support, got a little bit better, then they'll come to me and I'll manage them. But I will manage someone completely different that's got PTSD to someone who is just stress and anxiety. Okay. Yeah.
In terms of, there's a loneliness epidemic, and it's getting worse and worse and worse. I find particularly with men in general, and a connection, poor social connection epidemic. What's the relationship between loneliness and stress?
Wow, I guess I could think of a piece of literature that a friend sent me probably about 2 years ago that looked at, in the Australian SAS, who are the most resilient soldiers. And they backtracked, what is it about these soldiers that were most resilient? And they were the medics. And there was these five or six particular medics that they have to be on the front line fighting, but also at the same time, if someone, a friend of theirs gets injured, they've got to be trying to. So they got nominated to be the most resilient. So therefore,
adaptable as well.
Adaptable in how to manage stress. And when the literature actually backtracked into what it was that was common amongst these medics, it was the fact that they came from loving families that allowed them to go out and explore, to make mistakes and come back, and they were loved. And that was what made them so resilient. Resiliency and stress, the key element is having community and having connection to others. With this, we're together in this situation. You can help me, I can help you. Having that form of trust and feeling safe is the ultimate stress reliever. Like, if you generally have a solid, concrete relationship with someone where you feel you can be authentically yourself and share when you're down and when you're up, and someone listens and connects with that, that just makes, it just so much more element of healing capacity with that sort of stuff.
Definitely. I think in evolution-wise, we're not designed to be on our own.
No.
I think if you're on your own, there's this subconscious physiological response that there's something wrong with you.
Yeah.
That you're not part of a bigger community as well. And I think that's supported in different physiological responses the body has for people who.
Oh man, you're a chiropractor.
Yeah.
Hands on.
Yeah.
Right. When I have massages or someone manipulates me and puts my hands in a certain way, there is an element to, yes, there's a manipulation component, but also even that hands-on component of just, okay, it's a bit of touch, but it's safe touch, right? There is an element of that when you're getting a massage and getting a release. It's like, that's also having someone do that and connecting and helping out with that. There's an element of that as well. I truly believe every time I get a massage, it's like, great, cool, I feel like this person's understanding me.
Definitely. is there some weird, even I find, even when I get a haircut, I get a haircut once a week. From that process, it's this weird thing, even like you get a haircut, and every time I leave, I just feel different. And then not just you look, I actually feel different.
Yeah.
And it's this weird self-care sort of element, or when someone gets a massage, and you do feel different from the connection or with that. So another thing is like, I guess, fulfillment. And people that have got alignment and living out of alignment, and the role that plays with stress. Yeah. Because if you're out of alignment, and a big thing is, even if you don't even know who you are to even begin with, which I think that's probably where to start.
100%.
You're gonna be on the merry-go-round, and that is stressful, because if you don't really identify your values, and then know who you are, identify your values, your purpose, mission, whatever you want to call it, and then live in alignment, it's very stressful. And if you don't, how would you say, if you have a client who you clearly can see this person they just don't know what the hell is going on with them, and they probably haven't even gone through that process to figure out their alignments and their values, and you can really see that's probably what's causing them this pain. How would you handle them beyond the physiology? Beyond the physiology, correct.
I do think helping a person to navigate their understandings of values is a place that I first start. And that can be simply as asking a question of like, if you were to have a loving grandparent and they were to see you acting in the world in accordance of the behaviors of how they would like you to act as a loving person, what would that person look like? So sometimes just kind of stepping out of who are you, but who would you like to be if you're a person who is actually presentable, of someone who is loved and authentic and shows up for people and people connect with and people find charismatic? Like, what would that look like for you? And sometimes that just comes down to powerful words, right? And it's just like, okay, respectable, ambitious, intelligent, smart. Okay, cool. There's a few words that we can work with here. And now what I want you to do is define those words. What do those words mean to you? Because discipline for me might mean something different discipline to you. Yeah, I remember getting disciplined by my granddad when I was like 8 years old and getting whipped. So someone says discipline to me, I'm like, well, I don't like that word. I would prefer order or structure. So you have to define what those words mean and then really kind of sit with that meaning and build it up, and then start integrating. Notice when you don't act in accordance with those values, and when you don't, reflect on why. And then we're starting to navigate the journey of like building your authenticity and pulling away from a persona or pulling away from an ego inflation of someone who has been validated by external, but now we're starting to look internal, and we can use the breath to do that. What does discipline mean to me? Close my eyes, take a breath, sit with it. Meditation. Okay, cool. You're going to get an answer. Right? So they merge together. Once this person has got below the surface of the physiology, they can then get into more of the deeper, meaningful stuff, which then obviously builds someone towards having some form of more fulfillment in their life.
Definitely. In terms of specific techniques for breathing, what are a couple of the key ones that you use?
Yeah, typically there's resonant frequency breathing, coherent breathing, where it's roughly between 5.5 and 6 breaths per minute. So 6 breaths per minute is a typical position where I'd start. I might do a 1-to-2 ratio and try and either stress, prolong and exhale. So focusing on, I have a concept, basically NGSE, nasal, gentle, slow, expansive. That's how we should be breathing with our breathing behavior. So if you ever feel anxious or stressed, just check yourself. Am I breathing from my nose? Am I breathing gentle? Am I breathing slowly? Am I breathing expansively? Essentially, using more lateral diaphragm rather than your chest. And that's just a quick check-in tool whenever you feel as if maybe you're a little bit stressed or anxious, whatever. And then there's specific practices of focusing, just really connecting to having that good mechanics of your breathing and just staying in a flow of constant, roughly 6 breaths per minute, and try and allow your breathing to take over and sit in relaxation.
Would you apply different breathing techniques to different scenarios? for example, I've got a few different scenarios. If you're in the athlete spectrum versus someone who's doing a speech versus someone who's about to go on a date, where someone's getting versus someone getting performance anxiety in the bedroom. How would you, on a few of those, because they're quite different. Some of them are they're ongoing. Other ones are just like they almost need to be a bit more centered before they start, and then they're okay. Is there a different process you'd have for different types of stress?
I mean, stress, breathing typically, if we're thinking about in that situation, we're either upregulating and increasing arousal or downregulating and decreasing arousal. And what I would typically allow someone to do is just understand where are they at in their state and have them to have the awareness to go, right, I'm too elevated, I'm too excited, so I need to calm my breathing down in the bedroom. Right, I'm too elevated before I get on stage to give a talk, so I need to slow my breath down and prolong the exhales. So they'll learn a few different techniques, but more so learn about how do they work for themselves. Because you might apply one breathing technique and it might actually make them feel more stimulated, but then you apply it to someone else and they might feel more like they're about to fall asleep. So there is a journey that you go on, and this is what coaching is. It's no different from facilitation. It's a journey you go along to figure out what works for that person. And then you have maybe an array of 4 or 5 or 6 different tools or practices that are cemented for that person, for what they want to do, for what they want to, for their outcomes. The main things in terms of that process that I'm looking for is level of stress, whether the person's actually connected to their body and understands how they can feel. If a person can't feel their heart beating in their chest by closing their eyes and just sitting with it, I think that person's disconnected. And therefore, if I start doing challenging things, they'll just dissociate from the challenge and won't live the experience. I want them to navigate a relationship with their body, not just go for things because it's a goal there. There's a difference between goal orientation and building a relationship and understanding yourself. Goal orientation is great if you're an athlete and you're about to go out and have a fight with someone. You don't want to be feeling what you're feeling. You want to hit the goal. You want to perform. But what about if that athlete is feeling anxious, nervous, and has relationship issues away from the sport? Well, maybe we need to start and help them understand themselves in that situation. So it applies on the principle and the context of actually who you're working with at the same time. And that's where breath work methods don't work sustainable long-term for everybody.
In terms of your, if I'm always interested in learning more and upskilling in various spaces or endeavors I'm going into. So in terms of you've got a certification program that you've released. Tell me about that.
Like I said, it wasn't something that I intended to do. I had a few people reach out to me, a couple of exercise physiologists and Wim Hof instructors reach out and go, hey, look, I'd love to learn from you. And I just went, right, okay, here's what I think I can put together. Here's 12 modules that I'll specialize in. It was like, right, but breathing mechanics, understanding the biochemistry of breathing, nervous system regulation, understanding how emotions are made and how they interact with our breathing and just our life in general. Then we'll look at exercise, cold and heat, sleep disordered breathing, burnout, but breath work in the psyche. And then the final things were like tie into how can we clinically assess and actually build some coaching structures. 6-month program, every 2 weeks the people are getting either if it's one-on-one, a live lecture with myself or a Q&A with a group. And we go through that process of learning all that. And there's supplementary videos, there's knowledge assessments, there's case studies. And really it's a certification designed to help people to navigate the powers that we can use to turn people from having a problem in their life to actually having a solution and leaving them empowered enough so that they don't need to come back to you again. So that you can work with someone for 2 to 6 months, educate them, have them understand how to apply these tools and keep them going so that at the end of it, that is the knock-on effect. Like you don't need to keep working with me because you've done the work that we need to do together to improve you. Get to a point where you need to improve, you just need to sustain the practice.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to create a certification that's different from just going, you're certified in this particular method. I'm trying to say, hey, you're certified in understanding why we apply, when we apply, in what context and how and when.
So it'd be pretty relevant for particularly anyone who wants self-mastery, high performer, to understand that process, or whether you're a particular coach
people
working
who are
with
trying
anyone.
to coach that sort of stuff. Right? So I've got from Wim Hof instructors to psychologists to chiropractors, osteopaths,
professionals
dentists,
dealing with people.
Yeah.
You want to understand, have extra tools
Just
to...
strength and conditioning coaches, PTs. There is what I'm teaching is so relevant, and it's never not going to be relevant because I'm helping people just manage stress in their own life, and that's what I'm essentially trying to do is performance through health is creating longevity in performance, and that performance is about you. What do you want to achieve, and how do we create that so it's sustainable?
Definitely.
And it's looking at, okay, we can switch on, but how do we switch off? And then when we switch on, how do we actually make sure we are switched on? And when we're switched off, how do we actually make sure that we are relaxing and not still thinking about where everything needs to go? So that is never going to go away. If anything, stress and anxiety are on the uprise.
Finally, I'm fascinated by resilience and becoming a more resilient human being. What are 3 things you'd give to someone? What 3 things should people focus on to become the most resilient human being?
Challenge yourself. Challenge yourself.
Yeah.
I don't care whether that is like, I would say some physical exertion is going to be the one that is going to be probably the most powerful. Whether that is in the gym or whether that's combat sports or MMA, like one of those sort of things is really, for me, is going to be like, right, this is going to teach you how to just do hard work. That's going to be one component of it. The next component of it would be learn how to truly relax. Learn how to switch off. Learn how to use things like your breath, how to understand relaxation in the body, how to release muscles, and to actually go into a state where you can feel and you can like connect and slow that down. Like you can literally connect to your heart beating, and by thinking and just breathing, you can slow it from 60 breaths per minute to 40 breaths per minute. Then you can scan your body and you can relax all your muscles in your body. And before you know it, like you're literally drifting off into sleep. But how many people actually learn how to do that skill? No one. We're not taught it. But we need it in today's society because how many people can switch off? Not many. That, and then just making sure that we are truly communicating and connecting to loved ones.
Amazing. Martin, thank you for your time. You're doing great work. It's really good to see someone in the space that's is really going deep into the science and applying it, and still who is spiritually connected and open, and really making some waves. And I know it's early days, and good luck for the future. I'm excited to see what it all builds up into.
Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you, mate.
It's been great.
Cheers.